When people tell you to get lost, they don't probably usually mean it, right? Well, here I am, 50-mile-an-hour winds, 20 degrees in the middle of nowhere. It starts with a road trip to the East Sierra Mountains of California. We passed by a lot of land that was devastated by countless California wildfires, and are now being harvested for their wood before they rot. In place of the old burnt trees, they will eventually grow new forests of new trees. We stop by a local ranger station and explore a local city while geocaching before we head out into the mountains for good. We were hoping to drive all the way up to the lake, but there was a road closure, so we had to hike all the way into the mountains. Along with us are Tori and Maggie, owned by someone who was a former Canine Search and Rescue member. With an altitude of 11,000 feet, a simple mile becomes much harder. Adding our heavy packs on top of it, climbing to the base of our mountain was very difficult.
If you told me this was Switzerland, I would believe you.
After reaching the base of the mountain, we look for a good place to camp away from the 50-mile-an-hour wind that's going to be hitting us that night. After settling on a place, we take a rest, build our tents, and start cooking our food. There we go. We enjoy the last rays of sunshine before the sun goes down, and dread the 50-mile-an-hour wind that's gonna hit us that night.
I'm very cold.
My friend decides to go to bed, and in the meantime, I wait for the darkness. Once it's dark out, I pull out my PVS 14 night vision monocular and practice walking around with it on. Hoping to see the stars, I get hit with that 50-mile-an-hour wind and decide it's better to just go to bed. In the morning, we decide not to climb the mountain and would rather do some geocaching instead, so we pack up and begin our hike back to the car. Once we get back on the road, we make a few stops every now and then to enjoy the views. Among some of the geocaches that we searched for, we decided to find one that overlooked the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center. While we continued to geocache, I ended up finding a belt of blank ammunition for an M249 saw.
So pretty.
After finding the geocache that overlooks the Marine Corps base, we decided to find some geocaches along the Pacific Crest Trail. This loop of the Pacific Crest Trail goes up almost 2,000 feet in elevation. Because this loop was so difficult, we decided to scramble between certain parts of the trail so we didn't have to do the whole thing. After finding the geocache that we wanted, I decided to climb the rest of this mountain that wasn't a part of the Pacific Crest Trail.
It's very high up, and there's not a lot of oxygen up here. Climbing mountains is hard. Scramble and boulder up here. The trail doesn't come up here because it's a very, very steep incline. Gotta go back down.
After heading down and returning to my party, we decide to head back down the mountain the fun way.
Come on down! Woo-hoo-hoo! Get 'em, girls!
I've got so much snow in my pants.
Needless to say, that's the best way to go down 11,000 feet of elevation. Once we get back to the car, we get back on the road and hit a local small town for some dinner.
So dirty.
Back.
After dinner, we found a road in the mountains that has a string of over 100 geocaches on it.
Oh, that was easy.
Because there's so many geocaches, we decided to sleep on the road and find the rest in the morning.
You got all the layering there, the rocks.
Oh yeah, pretty.
That's a cache. Good girl, Maggie May.
Quite simply, because we're moving from one geocache to the next along this road, there's not a lot to talk about. Once we were finally done geocaching, we drove down the road and found something really interesting. We ended up finding a car that had fallen down the mountainside some time ago.
Wow. Someone had a bad day.
The car wreck itself looks like it had been there for some time, so we were pretty sure no one was in there. After quite a few days of adventure, we decided it's time to head home. While we stopped to grab a bite to eat, I looked at my hand and noticed that because it was so cold out, my skin became really fragile and allowed the skin to tear and open up, so I had dozens of little cuts on my hand. But after learning why you should wear gloves in the snow, I finally said goodbye to the Sierra Mountains and took a long road trip home.
Maggie, find cache.